In this GlowShift Gauge's installation video, we'll show you how to install a GlowShift 7-color series diesel gauge package into your 1999 to 2003 7.3-liter Ford Superduty. The additional accessories featured in this video will make installation easier and can be purchased through our website. For the purpose of this install, we'll be using a 2002 7.3-liter Power Stroke. For safety, disconnect both negative battery terminals before starting any work on the vehicle. If you purchased a T-fitting to install your boost line, start by locating the Manifold Absolute Pressure sensor line. Cut the line using hose cutters. Place the hose clamps onto each end of the cut line, insert the T-fitting, and tighten the clamps. Wrap the boost line adapter with Teflon tape and place it into the T-fitting. Tighten using an 11mm wrench. Place the female brass fitting onto one end of the boost line, followed by the brass ferrule fitting. Ensure the ferrule fitting is facing upward to prevent any leaks. Then connect it to the boost line adapter and tighten using a 10mm wrench. Secure the boost line with zip ties to keep it clear of any moving parts. If you purchased a heater plug adapter for your installation, locate the intake air heater on the cold side of the intake manifold. Use a 13mm socket to disconnect the intake air heater power wire. Use a 10mm socket to remove the nut and power wire from the stud on the intake air heater. Remove the ground wire from the intake air heater and use a 13mm socket to disconnect the opposite end from under the intake manifold. Then remove the heater assembly from the intake manifold using a 1-inch wrench. Insert the heater plug adapter into the manifold and tighten using a 1 1/16" wrench. Remove the plug from the adapter. Wrap the boost line adapter with Teflon tape and place it into the heater plug adapter. Tighten using an 11mm wrench. Place the female brass fitting onto one end of the boost line, followed by the brass ferrule fitting. Ensure the ferrule fitting is facing upward to prevent any leaks. Then connect it to the boost line adapter and tighten using a 10mm wrench. Secure the boost line with zip ties to keep it clear of any moving parts. If you did not purchase a T-fitting and want to install the boost line directly onto the intake manifold, start by removing the intercooler coupling from the manifold. We recommend placing a shop vac inside the manifold opening to stop any shavings from falling into the engine. Using a punch, mark the flat location on the manifold for drilling. Starting with a small drill bit, drill a hole in the manifold, increasing the bit size until a size R is reached. Use a 1/8-27 MPT tap to thread the hole. Clean up any metal shavings. Apply Teflon tape to the boost line adapter and thread it into the hole using an 11mm wrench to tighten. Place the female brass fitting onto one end of the boost line, followed by the brass ferrule fitting. Ensure the ferrule fitting is facing upward to prevent any leaks. Then connect it to the boost line adapter and tighten using a 10mm wrench. Secure the boost line with zip ties to keep it clear of any moving parts. Reinstall the intercooler coupling and tighten. To install the fuel pressure sensor, attach the 7.3 sensor adapter to the sensor and tighten using 14mm and 22mm wrenches. Using the yellow drain valve, drain all the fuel from the filter housing before removing the fuel filter plug. Be sure to use a drain pan to catch the fuel that drains from the housing. Once the fuel's been drained, locate the factory fuel filter plug on the back side of the housing and remove it using a 3/16" Allen key. Insert the sensor and adapter into the housing and tighten using a 14mm wrench. Attach the sensor harness wire and run the opposite end of the wire to the driver's side firewall, keeping clear of any moving parts. To install the exhaust temperature probe, locate a flat portion of the driver's side exhaust manifold and use a punch to mark the location for drilling. Starting with a small drill bit, drill a hole in the manifold, increasing the bit size until a size R is reached. Use a pen magnet and shop vac to remove any metal shavings that may have fallen into the manifold. Use a 1/8-27 MPT tap to thread the hole. Apply anti-seize to the EGT sensor adapter. Attach it to the manifold and tighten using a 14mm wrench. Insert the exhaust temperature probe into the bolt. Ensure that the depth of the probe is approximately halfway into the manifold and tighten. Route the sensor wire to the top of the engine bay and be sure to keep clear of any moving parts. To install the transmission temperature sensor, remove the transmission test port plug using an 11mm socket. Be sure to use a drain pan to catch any fluid that may drain from the transmission. Apply Teflon tape to the sensor and place it into the transmission. Tighten using a 14mm wrench. Attach the female silver connector and the longer rubber cover to one end of the green wire from the gauge wiring harness. And connect it to the white wire from the sensor. Then, attach the male silver connector and short rubber cover to the end of the black wire from the gauge wiring harness. And connect it to the black wire from the sensor. Run both wires to the engine bay, making sure to secure them out of the way of any moving parts. Once all of the sensors have been installed, run all the sensor wires to the driver's side firewall, keeping clear of any moving parts. Connect the braided EGT gauge harness wire to the sensor harness wire. Run all sensor wires through an open grommet in the firewall. If an open grommet is not available, carefully make a hole in an existing grommet and feed the wires into the cabin. Be sure to keep them clear of any moving parts. Attach a ring terminal to the black ground wire from the transmission temperature sensor and connect it to a reliable grounding source in the engine bay. Remove the factory pillar from the truck. Place the gauge pod on top of the factory pillar and use the included screws to attach them together. Drilling pilot holes will make installation of the screws easier. To properly wire the gauges to the pod, you'll need to drill a hole in the factory pillar under each cup for the wiring to pass through. Apply Teflon tape to the fitting on the back of the boost gauge and attach the boost line adapter. Tighten using a 13mm wrench. Feed the wires for the boost gauge through the pod and insert the gauge into the cup. Next, feed the wiring harness for the EGT transmission temperature, and fuel pressure gauges through the pod and place each gauge into the cups. Using the red wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the red wires together. Using the yellow wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the yellow wires together. Using the orange wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the orange wires together. Using the black wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the black wires together. Use zip ties to clean up the wires. Place the included colored caps onto the gauge pod screws. To install the gauge pod onto the pillar, remove the kick panel to gain access to the fuse box and ground connection. Feed the sensor harness wires up through the dash and to the pod location. Using a wire connector, connect the green wire from the transmission temperature sensor to the green wire from the gauge power harness wire. Plug the fuel pressure and EGT sensor harnesses into the back of each gauge. To connect the boost line to the back of the boost gauge, run the boost line through the pod. Place the brass nut over the line followed by the brass ferrule fitting. Ensure the ferrule fitting is facing upward to prevent any leaks. Place the boost line into the adapter and tighten the nut on the gauge using a 10mm wrench. Feed the power wires from the pod down through the dash. Use a panel pop tool to loosen the dash trim and feed the orange wire from the gauges through the panel. Place the pod onto the pillar. Ensure that the bottom of the pod is fully tucked into the dash and that the pillar clips are securely fastened. In order to test for power, reconnect the negative battery terminals. To enable the dimming feature, remove the headlight switch panel from the dash trim and use a test light to locate a wire that receives 12-volt power when the headlights are turned on. Attach a wire tap to the headlight wire. Then, attach a wire connector to the orange wire from the gauges and plug it into the tap. Reinstall the panel. For this installation, we'll be powering the gauges using expandable circuits, which can be purchased through our website. Using a test light, locate a fuse that receives constant 12-volt power. Remove the constant 12-volt fuse, place it into the circuit, and attach the first expandable circuit to the yellow wire from the gauges. Place the circuit into the fuse's location in the fuse box. Then, locate a fuse that receives 12-volt power when the ignition is turned on. Remove the 12-volt headlight fuse, place it into the circuit, and attach the second expandable circuit to the red wire from the gauges. Place the circuit into the fuse's location in the fuse box. Locate a clean, reliable grounding source and connect the black ring terminal wire from the gauges. Reinstall the kick panel. Power your gauges to ensure that everything is working properly. You've now successfully installed your GlowShift diesel gauge package into your truck. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please contact us at 1-888-GS-GAUGE, and we'll see you on the road.